This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
So you may or may not have seen that I kind of got sent by Alec a couple of links that linked this new Fender Tone Master Pro. I did a quick video on it, kind of looking at what the specs appear to be, looking at what they are saying the feature set is, and, you know, reading the typical sort of stuff that I guess we're kind of used to seeing people talk about, you know, like these are the best sounding things so far, you know, the easiest that a model has ever been to use. Now, in very recent history, I think we've got the example of the Neural DSP Quad Cortex to use as a way to sort of be more skeptical as purchasers of gear. I was on the pre-order for the Neural DSP Quad Cortex as someone that had, you know, checked out some of their plugins, dug it in some ways. I was also kind of curious about some of the statements that they made. I think a few years in now, we're starting really to get with the Quad Cortex somewhere closer to where it is that they basically said that they were at launch. So kind of the big selling point of the Neural DSP Quad Cortex at the time was that this thing's going to be able to run the plugins. And, you know, the plugins are the reason that anyone knew who Neural DSP even were. And this was going to be their unique kind of feature, the selling point of the unit in general anyway. And we're still now kind of, what are we, 3 years in? If I still had a Quad Cortex, I still wouldn't be able to run plugins. Now, the Pliny X update is coming at some stage, so it looks like that might be soon. But what it means is that as, I guess, end users and people that have to buy pieces of gear, I think we should probably be a little bit more skeptical and maybe even ask ourselves, should we even care about some of this stuff? So there's been a few products that have come buy and sort of flashed into our consciousness, or mine, maybe yours as well. Let me know if they've stayed in your consciousness or not. But flashed in quickly, flashed out. And so things that come to mind, the Tone X pedal. So I think this is still motoring along in a way, but you know, people like me at the time were demoing them and thinking like, there's probably a chunk of Kemper users that might be thinking this could actually go on their board and do what they wanted from Kemper all along, which was maybe like a smaller pedal size unit. That was, for me, why I kind of thought maybe this might be a Kemper killer, which is, you know, a stupid thing that you put in a title. But at the same time, I did see loads of times over the years people saying that they wanted a smaller form factor Kemper. I don't know whether the Tone X ends up being that. And certainly once that initial push of people being paid to demo them, myself included, once that fades away, you hear less about it. The next thing that I heard a lot about, well, a fair amount at the time, was the Headrush Prime. And I don't really hear people talking about that too much anymore. The unique selling point for that, I guess, was that it has auto-tune built in, which is coming over from Antares. At the time, I thought that may be an indication that possibly in the future we might see more kind of companies working together in that way. So, you know, where you've got companies that maybe build hardware and you've got other companies that do auto-tune like Antares, that maybe you could see some kind of cross-pollination. I think that might be a good thing for users. I think back in the day, Digitech used to actually license some Lexicon reverb algorithms, that sort of thing. I think that would be cool. Whether that ever happens again, who knows? But that was what was interesting to me about the Headrush Prime, as well as they started doing some of the kind of Capture-based stuff, which quite a lot of units can do now. So I guess that's no longer really a unique selling point. Then there was recently, I think maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, the Headrush Core, which is like their updated, smaller unit, but I think they've still got all... I haven't actually seen as much about that one. For whatever reason. I guess I got contacted asking if I'd do some videos on the Ampero Mini. There's just so much stuff that comes along, and the question that I'm really asking for myself now is like, how is some of this stuff actually different? So the Fender Tone Master Pro is 4 kilos. Looks like it's, well, that is about twice the weight of a Quad Cortex. It's lighter than a Helix. It looks a lot like a Helix, to be fair. You know, you've got scribble strips. Kind of looks like a Helix crossbred with a Quad Cortex. In the text, you saw it say that there's 100 amps and effects, which means that at launch, it's going to have far less than any of the main competitors. I guess that's the point for me. Like, as a guitarist, I'm looking for value in gear, and it turns out oftentimes that the newer stuff, unless it's from someone like Line 6 or Fractal, particularly Fractal, where they've got a huge library of learnings that they've made over the years, that you don't get as much for your money when you buy a newer piece of gear. Yes, it might be newer hardware, although even like in the case of the Quad Cortex, there's a bunch of shared components with the Helix anyway. What you're really paying for with these units, frankly, is algorithms in them. And so if there are less algorithms in your piece of gear, then you're getting less for your money in some ways. I also don't think it's said anywhere in the text so far that the Tone Master Pro can do the kind of party trick of the Quad Cortex, the capturing stuff. And I think that was quite an important part of why the Quad Cortex made sense, especially when the plugins weren't there yet. It was kind of like this other thing that could do what the Chem could do. So if the Tone Master Pro isn't going to do that either, then what it's got going for it is that it's got a more, well, the more appealing display potentially from what we've seen of it, where you actually have sort of icons that look like the actual thing. So I guess we've seen that with Headrush as well. They've done that sort of thing on the layout, and Nu X even did that. So whether that's a unique selling point or not, I'm not sure. But basically what I'm saying is that you're going to see a lot of videos probably all come out at once from folks that are saying that this is, however, it is amazing or the best thing yet or whatever. And I think it's fair to say that I'd be watching those videos with some degree of skepticism. Equally, I'd be watching my own videos with these things and thinking, well, he's probably just doing that because he's been paid to say it. But at least I'll be telling you that I was paid to demo the product, hopefully. But yeah, so for me, I've not seen competition that has made me think, well, that clearly outdoes the Helix, that clearly outdoes the Fractal stuff. So I think for me, if you're looking for best bang for buck, if you're interested in that sort of stuff, then Fractal still stands above the rest as having the most algorithms in there. I don't think anyone's really disputing yet that the Fractal stuff doesn't sound really good. It's still the highest oversampled, 16 or 8 times. It's still, you know, got the most algorithms in there, some really amazing sounding delays, reverbs, effects, all that stuff. The most variety of amps from most Fenders, the most Marshalls, the most Dumble things. Basically across the board, the Fractal stuff has most of it. And I'm skeptical as to whether Fender would even have the sort of motivation to keep updating stuff, because the big companies like Boss, for instance, don't actually do too much in the way of firmware updates. Line 6 do, Fractal probably do the most. Neural DSP have been pretty diligent about keeping that going, although it may have been slower than perhaps some users might have hoped, and maybe we are a bit behind where we thought we might be as people that bought the Quad Cortex. Kemper have carried on updating in an almost crazy way. What else is there? The Hotone Ampero, that's still getting updates, and I think people are maybe frustrated on that one in terms of waiting for things like snapshots. Tonex, I don't know if there is too much to come in terms of updates for that, because it kind of is what it is. It's a capture device, right? Until we know more about that. I don't know, I just feel like I've learned a bit of a lesson with the Quad Cortex stuff, that potentially, although you can make a lot of bluster and, you know, give a lot of units away to people that have lots of followers and maybe make really cool music, it doesn't necessarily translate to a product which is actually quite where you said it was going to be. And I think, you know, users that have come from Fractal and Helix, I think that have been using them for years and know what they're missing. You know, when you go to a unit which you can't assign multiple things to one switch, you can't change the layouts. I think still Line 6 and Fractal kind of have that upper tier functionality, which is not that obvious unless you get your hands on these things. So I'd be interested to see what this Fender unit can do, but quietly skeptical about it as well. I don't know if you feel the same. Maybe you don't even care at all, but you know, Fender with the Tone Masters, I think a lot of people really enjoy the tones there. So there's reason to be kind of optimistic in a way that this thing is going to sound good. It looks like it's going to be pretty much gig ready to go. It's got a looper in there for 60 seconds. It looks like it's got both preset and stomp functionality. How flexible that is, we don't know. But probably in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see a lot of stuff about it. But that's kind of my feeling. I'm going to be kind of watching skeptically and thinking, you know, is that a thing that actually would replace anything of what I've already got? Of course, I'd probably be singing a different tune if Fender had sent me one, because A, I wouldn't be able to talk about this yet because I'd be under NDA, and B, you know, I'd be excited to show you a new piece of gear in some ways, which would draw people to the channel. But that kind of is what it is. I'm just thinking, like, with the Quad Cortex, I bought that and was kind of a little bit disappointed. Am I going to buy a new unit from Fender? Probably not, because I don't want to risk disappointment again with a new unit. Maybe it's good to wait a few months, maybe even a few years, until you see what a product's life cycle is actually going to be like, whether those manufacturers are supporting the product well, whether there's failures in live use or lots of you know, units failing amongst friends of yours that you know, that sort of thing. I don't know. That's just a video about that, innit?